Hi, everybody. I did my research project on the Beatles and their trip to Rishikesh, India to study transcendental meditation with a man named the Maharishi Yogi, which is this gentleman right here. So, some questions I had behind my research topic. Why did the Beatles go to India? What did they learn? And how did it impact their music? So, George Harrison, the guitarist for the Beatles, was the first to become interested in Indian culture. Um, At one point in the early 60s, the band was filming a scene for one of their movies in a restaurant, and there had been some sitar players on the movie set. And George became very interested, and he watched them while they were on set. And once they were done filming, he went back to meet them and attempted to play the sitar. So, following that experience, Harrison began practicing hatha yoga, and his interest in Indian culture grew. We'll return to that in a second. But the Beatles were interested in going to India because they were interested in opening the door to a higher consciousness without drugs. So the Beatles were famous in the 60s and they're pretty infamous for doing lots of drugs and it having an impact on their music. So they wanted to be able to reach this kind of spiritual high without doing drugs. And they thought that practicing meditation in India would be a good way to get there. So after they saw the Maharishi Yogi give a lecture in London, they decided then that they were going to take a trip to India to go study with him for a long period of time. I think a couple months was the intention of the trip. And during this time, Raga Rock became popular, and Raga Rock is the style that incorporates Indian traditional music into rock and roll. And there have been lots of discussions over who was the first band to do that, to introduce Raga Rock and make it popular. Uh, there are a few bands that are credited with this, but many of the readings that I did pointed to the Beatles as the original incorporators of Raga Rock. But with Raga Rock becoming popular, it wasn't just the music that became popular, it was Eastern religion and spirituality, clothing, fabrics, artifacts like clay deities and incense, myths and art culture, and even some vocabulary all became part of this fad that was erupting in Western pop culture. And the Beatles were the main source of publicity for Indian culture because of their trip and the Maharishi Yogi and of all the mass media coverage they received. So, as awareness of Indian culture continued to grow, more and more people started traveling to Asia, sometimes for drug related reasons, sometimes for meditative reasons. But with the Beatles promoting transcendental meditation, people became increasingly interested in Indian culture as well. Going back to George Harrison for a second, so after he tried playing the sitar on the movie set, he decided he really, really liked the sound of the sitar, and he heard from an American rock band about this guy named Ravi Shankar, who is a very famous and well-respected sitar player from India. So after they returned to London, Harrison decided that he was going to start taking lessons with Ravi Shankar. And while he did, he learned how to appropriately play the sitar, really good technique. And while he was doing that, he learned a lot of different aspects of Indian music and culture, which the Beatles started to incorporate into their music. And on the flip side, Ravi Shankar became very, very popular as he continued to be associated with the Beatles. He ended up playing lots of festivals like Woodstock in America, and so he has continued to be popular, and the two had a really wonderful relationship. So that's how George Harrison became a good sitar player. In February of 1968, the Beatles traveled to Rishikesh, India to study transcendental meditation with the world famous yogi, the Maharishi. And this was a very secluded place. It was up in the Himalayan mountains near the Ganges River, pretty much cut off from all of the busyness that the Beatles were used to that came with their fame. Um, so they were really trying to reach that spiritual awakening and get into that mindset. Now, while they were in India at this place with the Maharishi yogi teacher, they were doing meditations for more than 90 minutes every day, and it's recorded that they did even more than that as their stay went on. So the longer they stayed, the longer they meditated. John Lennon and George Harrison loved the meditation. They both got really into it. They wrote a lot of music during this time, while Paul and Ringo were more distracted and didn't really get into the meditation as much. And they ended up leaving a little bit earlier than John and George. So it did create a little bit of a rift in between the band. But they were okay after this trip anyway. And even though the Beatles spent most of their time in India meditating, they managed to write more than 40 songs while they were in India. Uh, Many of them made up the White Album. That whole album is made up of songs from their time in India, and anything that they couldn't fit onto that album, they put onto later albums as well. Now, the musical impact on the Beatles' music and on music in general is pretty large. So, Norwegian Wood was the first Beatles song to include a sitar, and critics said that that was about the most Indian flavored thing about it, was just that it included a sitar. Harrison was not well practiced on sitar at this point. This came out before he started taking lessons with Ravi Shankar. It is also important to note that even though Norwegian Wood was the first Beatles song to include sitar, one of their movies, the one that they had been filming when George discovered the sitar players, the movie included music that contained sitar, tablas, Indian flute, and finger cymbals. So they had included Indian music even before they realized how interested they were. I'm going to play you a little clip of Norwegian Wood so you can hear it. At first, you'll hear the guitar, and then you'll hear George Harrison play the sitar basically like a guitar. So this is the first clip I'm going to show you. I want you to notice the sitar playing in just the first few seconds. So as you can see, it's not really indicative of actual sitar playing that you might hear from a professional sitar player in India. But again, this was before he started taking lessons. So after he started taking lessons with Ravi Shankar, he began composing and writing other songs that had more Indian flavor. So Love You Too was Harrison's first song completely composed on sitar, and this was uh, much better played on the sitar than Norwegian Wood. Then Within You Without You is another song that Harrison wrote on sitar, but both of these songs included more Indian aspects like drones and harmonic stasis, ornaments, and Indian scales. So I highly recommend listening to those two. They're great songs, and you can really hear the difference. But I wanted to show you that The Inner Light is a song and it's the most Indian of the Beatles song. Again, it's written by George Harrison, but John Lennon and Paul McCartney loved it so much that they put it on one of the Beatles albums. And this song, I'm going to show you a clip of as well, but it moved away from the sitar and used more other Indian instruments, so like the sarod and harmonium and the shanai and pakawaj drums. So this was compared more to Hindu temple music than to some of the other sitar music they were using before. So I'm going to show you a little clip of that so you can hear the difference. So you can hear the big difference between Norwegian Wood, where he's plucking the sitar like a guitarist, and Inner Light, where there are so many more Indian flavored elements that make up that song. So the Beatles incorporated Indian style more than just through instrumentation. Even on songs that were not intended to be blatantly Indian, certain techniques were used as well. So, for example, in Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, a very famous Beatles song, Harrison echoes the vocals on electric guitar as an Indian sarangi player might do behind an Indian singer. So the Beatles had fully embraced the style of Indian music and even the spirituality of the country of the culture. Um, so with the Beatles becoming so interested in meditation and the culture of the East, it soon became a popular idea in the West in general. A lot of other bands started including these aspects. A lot of other bands like the Kinks and the Who also traveled to India to experience this meditative state and see how it impacted their music. So it opened up doors for other musicians and even just people who listen to music to incorporate this style into their own music. There are my references, and that is all. Thank you.